You felt incredibly close and textured and real. So what part of that was you?
It's that moment, really, that when I read it the first time, the bit that really got me was the bit on the Ferris wheel, really. Because I recognise it in myself, I recognise it in other people, and it just, I found it so moving.
Yeah.
So that I know that guy, I know what that is. And there was just a real tenderness to him that I really liked, a lovely energy in juxtaposition with the other two that it just worked. I could just see it. I could already see it. It just felt completely truthful. So.
You, Dan, must have been on film sets in some capacity for quite a long time. You must recognise and know them quite well. So how did that prepare you for the role of director?
I had directed several episodes of my television show, which was very different. It was
What's your television show? We don't.
It's a small comedy that was on Netflix for a bit, and so I knew the fundamentals. I did a lot of research. I met with a lot of my friends who had directed feature films before, and I sat down with them and asked them about all the things that I should keep in mind. It was also just a situation where I had written the script. I had such a clear idea of how I wanted it to feel and look, that I knew that if I were to bring another director on, I would just be helicoptering around them. So it probably made more sense for me to do it.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate in that we had an incredible cast. A couple of them are here today. Celia Imrie and Jamel Westman. There you go. Yeah, I wrote this script with, it's the first time I've ever written anything without any cast in mind.
Right, okay.
Which is rare. Usually you write for people, or at least you have someone in your mind while you're writing for them, and I didn't. And the casting process was then that much harder because you don't really know what you want, and yet you know exactly what you want. And so you hope and you pray that people walk into the room and they embody those characters in a way that doesn't require a ton of work. And so I was just very lucky that these actors came to this project and loved it. There was real kind of enthusiasm, which also helps. And, Luke, who came and did like 3 days or something, 3 very intense days in that house. And Ruth Nega, who is in Los Angeles and couldn't be here, but who brought such life to that character. And you write a character that is so inherently magnetic. And it's one of those things that an actor they can't act it. You almost have to really find it in yourself. And at the time, Ruth was being suggested for the role, and I was very flattered because it's Ruth Nega. And yet at the same time, I was like, I've seen the feature films she's done, and I don't know if this is, I don't know. And then Ruth, like, quite literally bounced into the room, completely opposite of anything you've come to know her as.
Yeah.
And from the minute she walked in the room, I knew that this was the person to play this part, and I was so relieved and I was so excited. And so when I called her, she said, well, I don't know. I actually don't know now if I want to do this because she just never done like that kind of energized role before. And I just said, well, you've already done it. You're doing it with me on the phone now. You're actually still doing it. So just keep doing this. And then getting to work with, Himesh came in, and there was such a sensitivity and such a sweetness and a vulnerability to the character that again required no effort. Yeah. It was so embodied, and then we just spent a good 2 weeks spending time with each other, because it's hard when you have to come straight into a dynamic that's so lived in. It was really important that we spent that time together and got to know each other. And then Luke came very much at the end of that situation, and then the 4 of us and some family went to Soho Farmhouse for a weekend. and just spent a weekend together being together. And I really feel like that made such a difference for us, because once we started shooting, there was such a familiarity, and we had fast-tracked so much of that intimacy it didn't require. We could make choices and do things that I feel like you don't often get to do when you're just walking onto a set.
I mean, you kind of are like the angel and the devil, you and Ruth, on Mark's shoulders. But you talked about that scene on the Ferris wheel, which absolutely destroyed me when you say, "It's never me." And we were talking earlier about, I was kind of just welling up just thinking about that moment. How do you sort of psych yourself up to just break the audience's heart? What is your process to get into that moment that you are so vulnerable?
I mean, with that one, it was, I didn't want to put too much pressure on myself, because actually it was a pressured environment, because we shot it on an actual Ferris wheel.
What?
And
That never happened.
we knew, so it was, I don't know if you want to talk about this, about how it happened. How did you manage to get that to happen?
There were a lot of big swings in this script, like an empty gallery of the most beautiful Monets you've ever seen, and like a Ferris wheel. And we just pushed until we got it. I was very pushy. But originally, we were supposed to have control of the Ferris wheel while we shot it for an evening. And then the people that run the Ferris wheel, who were later, they told us that there's, I guess, a criminal operation or something that runs the whole, it's like a mafia, I don't know, anyway.
We paid the mafia.
But we paid them. But the day before we started shooting, they were like, you cannot have it all night. You can have one car and one car for your crew, and that's it. You can have that car and that crew car for the whole night, but you will have to get into it as the other tourists are getting in, and that's how you have to shoot it. And so we rehearsed it the day before, going through the whole thing, because it had to land, the speech had to land just at the same time that we were going through again, to make sure that the joke of going through it worked. And so it really became this high pressure situation where they dressed the set. Our camera was, is Ula here? No, he was going to be our DP, Ula Berkland, incredible. He was sitting on the one side of the Ferris wheel, and we were on the other. And
He was sat completely covered in a black cloak. All you can see, I might post this photo at some point, is the camera coming out of this, and he's just completely, it's like he's trying to hide, and he is, that's basically what he's trying to do, so you don't see him in the reflection.
Yeah.
And so we have to do a really serious scene while looking at that. Struggled.
It was fun though. It's like the car came down and they were like, okay, get in and start. And the camera was rolling and we got in and started. And it was, I mean, and that's...
We had to do the right bit of the scene at the right point so that it cut together, but
it's the beauty of
filmmaking. There was a
I
magic
think.
to it. It came together, and so I didn't know. I just sort of had to trust in the rehearsal and trust in our dynamic, I suppose. And when the writing is that truthful, it doesn't take too much to get there, you know, because you just feel it when you say the words.
Yes, yes. It is beautiful. It has all the trappings of a rom-com, this film, but is actually arguably about an even greater love of friendships, and it feels like an incredibly mature film as well. Was that always the plan? Did you always want to write a film kind of a tribute to the power of friendships?
Yeah. I haven't seen a movie centered around friendship in a long time. I think you look at rom-coms and it's always kind of the friends or the quirky characters in the background as the central protagonist finds love. And I think to me, my relationships with my friends are so significant and so comforting. And I'm not someone who's chronically in relationships. So as a single person, your friendship group, especially as a gay single person, that's community. And so to celebrate the significance of friendship, putting the friendship front and center and keeping the romance at the back, was really important, because that's how I feel. That's the priority that friendship has in my life. And I just had never seen, or I haven't in a long time, seen a movie that celebrates the importance and the reliance that we have on the closest friends in our lives. So,
and we've kind of that greater community and the finding sources of sympathy and empathy in surprising places. We've talked about Celia being cast, but her scene at the end, that incredible speech. I know, Himesh, that touched you.
Big time. It was amazing.
I mean,
Amazing.
it floored me as well. But writing that scene and then performing it, can you tell us about that process? Because it is incredibly emotional, and I was like, it's kind of rare to have like a writer-director who was also in the film to give such a powerful moment to somebody else. I thought that was a really amazing thing.
I think it was, I mean, it was so, I mean, I will always kind of put myself in the back seat for the most part. That's just in my nature. But in these moments, I think it's so important that characters have, every character you bring into a story should have a beginning, middle, and end, even if they're seemingly small in the scale of the project. And so it was really important that this character, this business manager who we see as one thing in the beginning, ultimately the path through the movie for me was a kind of Little Prince story, where not only do you have the friendship, but you also have this other subplot of Mark realizing that grief is shared by everyone. Everyone in this room carries grief in some capacity. And so to have him sort of march through this movie, encountering all different types of people, whether it's his friends or whether it's the people he works with, that grief is all around him. And so for Celia's scene, it was just so important that that character reveal an element of herself that she had probably never shared with a lot of people, but there was something that crashed into her life at that time where she felt like that was her chance to give a warning to him to not do or end up in the situation that she ended up in. It felt meaningful to make sure that even little Emma Corrin's little moment where you see them as a performance artist, and then you kind of get that turn of realizing that their parents bought them the gallery and that they're doing this and they know they're not very good, and there's that kind of the grief they carry it was a tiny little thing, but it was important to round even their character out a little bit more too. So,
And we all went on a journey with Caitlin Dever's eulogy.
And then, of course, the amazing Caitlin Dever, who came in for one day, did a eulogy in front of 150 background performers. And I remember, because I'm just nervous on the best of days, I was sort of being overly kind to her, being like, do you need anything? Is there? And she's like, no. I've been doing sitcoms since I was 10. Like, got it. Right. Well, okay. And then just crushed it over and over and over again. And David Bradley and his beautiful eulogy that he gives, it was, I think for me, the great joy of making this movie was getting to sit and watch these tremendous actors come in and just lift the words to a place that I didn't expect them to even find. So it was the great thrill for me.
Himesh, I was kind of thinking about some of your past work, and I was thinking a lot of the stuff that you've done is quite high concept, with Station 11 and even Yesterday. And I was wondering, is this kind of, it almost takes you back to the EastEnders days where you're talking and it's quite, you're having real conversations. Was that quite a cathartic thing for you after having?
Yeah, I read it and I thought, this is just like EastEnders.
Based on reality.
No, it was nice to do something that was so grounded, actually, and truthful. I keep coming back to that word, but it was.
Yeah.
Actually, when you mentioned the rom-com thing, when I first read it, and I thought I knew where it was going.
Did you think that you two were going to get
Maybe, or just I thought I knew where it was going, and then there just came a point where I thought, this is really honest and true. It was that when I thought this is really about the friends. It's about the honesty of their friendship and what they're all going through, and it doesn't become something it needn't become. Although Mark does get that, and it's left. You don't know where that's going to go. It's there, and that's what's important. Whereas what we need to find out about is their bond, the three of them, and how, you know, I just thought that was so gorgeously done. I just immediately wanted to be in it,
Yeah.
and I got to be in it.
It was I mean, for me, I think going through my 30s, there's this moment of clarity that you have with your friendships, or lack thereof, which was really compelling, like, stuff to pull from. The messiness of friendships, and sometimes the people we have closest to us are the ones we kind of tend to overlook in certain ways. They're the shortcomings or the problems in our closest friends' lives are the ones we often excuse the most.
Yeah.
And if someone were to walk in from the outside and kind of look at the dynamics of certain relationships, they might think, they might need to have a chat. And that was really true. Again, going back to the truth of it all, the exploration of friendship, sure, but also how the grief, the domino effect of one tragedy in one of their lives, how that cracked open a kind of truth in all of their lives, and how they needed to confront things that they probably hadn't confronted in many, many years.
Yeah.
The hope that it would make them stronger as a trio.
I feel like it's a long time since I've seen a film kind of hold up a mirror and me to not necessarily see myself in all of the characters, but to absolutely recognise the scenarios that they're going through, because it's so specific. I think that specificity is the thing that gets us really in the feels. I want to turn it over to you guys now, so if you have a question, please put your hand up.